From SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas, the most watched and listened to content in B2B sales and marketing, it's the SBI Podcast with your host, Matt Shares.
Hey everybody, welcome to SBI TV, a weekly show dedicated to helping you make your number. I'm Matt Shares, CEO of SBI, and I'm very excited to be welcoming my guest today, who we've gotten to know over the last probably 6-7 years, which is Kim Salem-Jackson. Kim's the CMO at Akamai, and Akamai is a $3 billion publicly traded global cloud security solutions company. And Kim and I actually met one job prior to that, and I got to witness some of her incredible execution, but also the way that she worked with the entire executive team and the board. As a CMO, incredibly qualified, and so I'm thrilled that she's gonna come and chat with us today. And one of the reasons we asked her is that Akamai had an amazing year in 2020 by growing new logos. Double digits, north of 20%, where so many companies struggled with new logo growth. We thought that you, the audience, would benefit from hearing how they did it. So, Kim, enough about the lead-in. Nice to see you. How are you?
I'm excellent. Great to see you, Matt, and connect again.
Yes, it's been too long. So, Kim, I won't do your pedigree or Akamai justice. So maybe just tell the audience a little bit about you, a little bit about Akamai, and then we'll jump into the show.
Sure, it's my pleasure. Well, like so many CMOs, I grew up in marketing, started in PR, spent my career in tech, everywhere from small startups all the way to Akamai, a $3 billion company. So I oversee all the marketing functions from corp comms to demand, digital, and everything in between. And, simply put, Akamai helps enable and protect online businesses. So making your digital experiences fast, intelligent, and secure, which was kind of important last year during the pandemic, when everybody was relying on the internet as a lifeline to us all. So I was happy to be at Akamai.
Yeah. Well, and Kim, it's really interesting because I got to watch you in a company that was public that then went private, that had super high demands relative to growth from a private equity sponsor. So had the ability to see you do that. Now, seeing you running a public company as a CMO, and one's not better than the other. They're just different, and obviously the companies are of different size and scale relative to where you walked in. So I guess, you taking on the CMO role at Akamai, you first walked in, you weren't in that role. So maybe tell the audience kind of how it evolved to you ending up as the CMO.
Yeah, actually funny. So like everything, a colleague I used to work with at the company we met called me and said, "Hey, Kim, we have problems. Can you help us?" And I said, "What are your problems? What's the role?" And he said, "We need to optimize the demand engine. We don't have a role. Will you talk to my boss?" And so met with the president, met with the CMO. Lo and behold, I took over running demand and then took over corporate communication. So the number one priority was to start up the new customer engine. And I thought, well, I've spent most of my career spending 90% of my time on cross-sell and existing customers, maybe 10% on new customers. So this should be fun. And that kind of launched my journey into Akamai on the demand front. And we've been fine-tuning that model ever since.
So Kim, I guess, one of the ways of setting context is so many of the CEOs that we work with in different growth forums that I'll host with that group, many of them didn't grow up in sales. Even smaller percentages of them have any sort of depth, present company included, until I got into consulting 15 years ago, around marketing, right? It was, I grew up as a sales guy, understood that. For CEOs, they really struggle with thinking about how do I quantify marketing? How am I thinking about the value of it? And how am I thinking about it now as we're coming out of the pandemic? So maybe just kind of level set the way you think about managing the stakeholders of the CEO and the board and sales leadership and the role that marketing plays at a large enterprise company like Akamai.
Yeah, well, the advice I give to marketers is be patient and educate. And so the analogy I usually use when I'm talking to the CEO, the CFO, heads of sales, it's just like a stock investment. Yeah. If you give me $1, what am I going to give you in return? And how do you balance your portfolio to get the best outcome? And you can't stay static, right? The portfolio and the markets change, so does the marketing mix. And so you have to consistently adapt. And so that's usually how I start the conversation, is really focusing on ROI in a relatable term. And, even I just finished building an ROI calculator using historical data, literally super simple to say, here's the inputs. If you give me $1, here's what I'm going to give you in return, call it 4. And here's when I'm going to give you the return on your investment. Now let's unpack that and look at the data that informs the model and make sure we're comfortable. So I usually start there.
So, Kim, what you just said to me screams of elegant simplicity, because you said, hey, give me $1, right? I'm going to give you back 4. As the CEO of my marketing leader came to me at SBI and said that, I would just pour more money back to her. So,
I wish it's that easy, but yes.
but knowing that, is there a set of metrics that now that you've been there, you've turned on the new demand engine, you've sort of understood the culture, that you have now educated the CEO and the board to use to say, hey, are we getting what we should be from marketing? Maybe share a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many things I look at. I look at the size, the health, and the velocity of the pipeline, and I unpack it. But what I usually talk to is kind of our North Star is customer lifetime value, right? And so when I look at the demand model, I talk about what does that mean for year one and the customer lifetime value. So how can I increase customer lifetime value, reduce CAC, cost to acquire, increase productivity per head? And I use a lot of data science. So a lot of times they don't trust the marketer, let's just call it. But if you have a trusted data scientist that can do some sophisticated models, that helps to validate. So, in building our ROI, for example, we looked at customer lifetime value and we did a survival curve just to talk about, 10-year look back. How did we get to this customer lifetime value that could inform our ROI calculator? Matt, please don't ask me about the survival curve too deeply, but we use the survival curve to inform it. We look at multi-touch attribution. There's another KPI. So I understand precisely how many touches I need to win a deal. So on average, we know the median number of touches is 40. So existing customers, it's 69. New customers, it's a little bit less. But I use that as an indicator to say, hey, when we want to win a deal, what are our customers consuming and how much do they need to consume where I know there's a higher probability to win? And so we use a lot of those different kind of inputs to determine. Then we get fancy even in targeting. You look at what I call propensity, intent, and engagement. So who's the right fit using all those predictive marketing tools, share of wallet, and the right attributes to buy from us. Intent, do they have the right signals? Are they in market right now? And then engagement, are they on our website, right? Because that's a better indicator. And I know there's a correlation between those that look at our product pages and those that buy, which makes sense, right? They're not tinkering. So there's a lot of different KPIs that we use and expose to the business to get better understanding of the marketing model.
Okay, so for the audience, so I'm going to let Kim take a breath and I'm going to try to summarize the amazing set of learnings she just gave everybody. So CAC, LTV, obviously, those are the two ultimate measures of capital efficiency. Anybody who is a marketer or a CEO thinking about your marketer, the fact base you use around capital efficiency, CAC, LTV, right, by segment, by sales channel, and by product line. Second thing, what I loved what Kim said is she talked about propensity, intent, and engagement, right? It's one thing to have propensity. It's another thing not to have any intent or have low engagement. So being able to vacillate between that as you communicate with the sales team is critical. One thing I would say, Kim, that we notice is oftentimes organizations are working off of two different fact bases, or three, right? So sales has a fact base of what they should be doing, marketing is running a set of data and a fact base, and customer success is looking at a different set of metrics, and nobody's normalizing around commercial, right? Everyone's normalizing around a piece known as a function. So I guess last piece in this segment, is there anything you've done as you've continued to work on LTV and stickiness as you extend beyond the new logo curve into cross-sell, upsell, because you come from a great background of expansion where many marketers kind of go the other way. They come from classic demand gen and they're learning how to market with the base and use that data. I'd love your feedback on that.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a testament to my background. So you need a single source of data. And a kind of data office, right? Because, I mean, how many conversations have marketers and sales had where they have one outcome and we have another because we look at a different data set. So having a shared data set and agreed upon, I think, is the first step. And also just fighting it out, for example, like I say, have the good fights where you can debate the integrity of the data. So have a shared data set. Fight it out, unpack the data, agree to disagree. And then at the end of the day, sometimes I find a compromise. It's like, regardless of what number you choose or how you want to measure ROI, put a line in the sand and then just focus on productivity increase. So let's go back to the first ROI. Maybe if it's not $4, you want to call it 2, fine. How do we get from 2 to 10 instead of 4 to 15?
Love it.
And so at the end of the day, I always focus on productivity lists and year over year, even if you can't get aligned on the actual data set. So
Very
that's
good.
another compromise I often make.
Okay. All right, folks. So in this segment, my friend Kim Salem-Jackson and I, we're going to talk a little bit about new logo growth. So many of you coming out of the pandemic been very focused on back to base. Akamai had an amazing run and had great new logo growth year over year. And there's a lot of inquiring minds out there that want to know how. So, Kim, I guess in terms of like the way it got done, how you zeroed in, messaging mix, without revealing anything confidential, share a little bit about what worked, because that was a real area where there were headwinds, and there still are headwinds.
Yeah, I would say 3 things. 1, stay focused. 2, adapt. And 3, use data as your guidepost. So for us, of course, we prioritized engaging on new customers. So most organizations in the middle of the pandemic kind of pulled back and went back to their base, which of course we did, because servicing your customers was more important. But we didn't take the foot off the gas, and we really stayed focused on the new customer engine. Again, Akamai enabling and protecting business online, right place, right time. But that was number 1.
Yep.
2 is we adapted. So we had to respond to our customer needs. So we had to rethink our messaging and meet them where they were. So educate versus sell, to drive a lot more thought leadership, even pivot. Instead of leading, we're focused on being a security leader. Our heritage is in content delivery. And so we, instead of pushing our pure security message, we pivoted to business continuity, right? Because that was really important. How do I secure my remote workforce that isn't in the office anymore? So instead of the messages we planned, we pivoted our story. And then last but not least, of course, we changed the channels, right? We couldn't do a lot of the face-to-face, and so we had to meet them in these digital forums. So adapting was important. Data is the guidepost, so looking at those leading indicators, intent and engagement, and really following the money. And the engagement, I always tell sales, like, we're looking for buyers, we're not trying to sell. And so, if you have a bunch of people at a car dealership and they're circling the car, we should focus on those people versus the person in the house that probably bought a car last year, right? So instead of sales using these cold lists, and because they feel like it's a good account, use data as your guidepost and follow the money and follow the demand. And then you've got to adapt again. And so what worked for us in March 2020 didn't work in July. And so we really had to monitor engagement and behavior of the customers, right? We went from big bang digital events to micro experiences and emulating what happened physically, digitally. And so those were kind of 3 of the strategies: stay focused, adapt, and use data as your guidepost.
And with your permission, I'm going to steal micro experiences, because I love terminology. My team makes fun of me all the time at dreaming them up. So I'm going to take that shamelessly, and I may pass it off as my own. But let me hit you with, I guess, a follow-up question, because it's fascinating how fluidly you speak about it, and I can just tell the authenticity and obviously knowing you in terms of how you work so nimbly, right, across the commercial organization. And one of the things that we've noticed, Kim, is that the impact and the demands on a seller over the past 12 months to be much more commercial in terms of education versus selling, right? To be better at writing, to be better with content, to be much better with context. So talk to us a little bit about that component and how are you educating and upskilling the sales team? Because it seems like you work in such concert with them to drive this outcome.
Yeah, repetition. So I'm very humble and I repeat myself a lot to get breakthrough because they have a lot of noise and marketing isn't the first one. I also tell them master storytelling. So it's kind of like back to school, right? Yeah. I said, we grew up hearing stories. Everybody remembers a story. So become master storytellers about what we make possible versus what we do. And I show them the competitive landscape and where organizations are winning and losing. And so I would say being loud and proud and over communicating has been critical right now in engaging sales and getting them to think different. The nice thing for marketers today is I think that COVID was a catalyst for rethinking how you go to market and living in a digital first world and relying on your marketers. Because before you kind of knew how to sell and it was tried and true, you've been doing it for a long time, and this threw everyone on their head. And, marketing, because of the advancements we've been making in digital transformation and digital engagement models, I think we were just poised to catch and release sales and send them on a different trajectory that maybe they weren't on before. So I think by the nature of where we were, we just got their attention and they were really more open than ever for help and how to engage in this new world.
Yeah, so Kim, it's just such an interesting point on micro experiences, but also digital enablement. And just a quick sidebar to finish this segment. So as you know, we've historically done face-to-face events here at our studio in Dallas, right? It's a cool venue to host events, and we would do growth forums for CEOs or CROs. The hardest part for Melissa and Kate on the team was logistics. It wasn't getting people to say, I want to come. It's like flying in, giving the day. Now we do them virtually. Kim, we're doing 6 times as many, right? And people can kind of slide in and slide out, less friction. They don't have to give up 2 days. They give up 3 hours. Like, to your point, when you said micro experiences, it literally resonated because that's had an impact on our business to the positive because people like to connect with their peers. So it's just such an interesting point. It's hit all of us in terms of, but to the positive.
Yeah, and I think, people always ask me what's next. I think the world will be hybrid in the future. I think, we'll end up meeting physically, but then, we'll constantly amplify. Or you might have, one person sitting in your studio with you with someone else on the phone, and it's seamless, right? Because we're all used to this digital engagement. So I think the world has changed forever, and we can reach far more people because of it.
All right, in this segment, Kim Salem-Jackson and I, we're going to talk a little bit about the concept of customer experience and specifically digital. So as Kim mentioned, if COVID wasn't a digital catalyst for marketers, I don't know what is or what would be. But Kim, I think one of the things that people really struggle with, and you even mentioned this relative to adaptability, is the ever-evolving buyer's journey, right? But the ever-evolving customer experience. And buyer's journeys and the buyer persona has become commonplace for probably the last decade. People are still struggling on customer experience. So in this segment, I thought maybe we would attack 2 components. The first is around digital and specifically the tech and the tech stack and the infrastructure that you look at. And then 2, I'd like to just get your opinion around customer experience, who owns it, and how you think about that. So on the tech stack, just for those watching and listening, I think as of last count, there's over 1,100 tools, right, in and around the go-to-market space, right? So Kim, how do you make sense of the very crowded, digital context and tool space for what you need?
Well, consistently evaluating the engagement and effectiveness. Mm-hmm. So, internal, I've been notorious for buying the next whiz-bang cool tool. And if nobody's using it, then, how effective is it? So we've been trying to strip out a lot of the noise in the tech stack and really evolve it to be more modern. So I talked a lot about the predictive, right, which is kind of the heart of our new customer. So looking at all those tools that look at propensity and intent, we're replatforming our website, our face to the world, our number one demand gen. And so that's another critical enabler for us. But I'm trying to focus on what's maximizing the customer experience, what's maximizing the impact, what has the greatest internal adoption, and getting rid of everything else. Because I don't know if there are any marketers out there that have endless budgets. I'm not one of them. Right. And so if I'm not getting optimum return on my tech investment, I don't want it. And so internal engagement as well as customer impact are two of the kind of key North Stars I look at in evaluating the tech stack.
And do you have a cadence even like around annual planning or annual budgeting where you say, okay, we've got whatever, the following 5 tools that everybody's using, I won't give any names because we're not endorsing anything on the show, and I'm going to look at all 5, or I've got 3 that I like. What's your cadence? And the reason I'm asking, Kim, is this comes up so often with our clients. Like the question of, hey, what's the right go-to-market tech stack? It comes up so much.
Yeah, and there's no silver bullet because what worked last year doesn't necessarily work this year. So I've been overhauling my tech stack. I actually look at our roadmap monthly.
Okay.
And we look at our analytical and our technical. Now, some things have a longer shelf life, right? You get into annual multi-year contracts. So, but for the things that we have more flex, we look at our roadmap monthly on what we need, the analytics stack and initiatives, as well as the underlying tech stack. And quarterly, we make some decisions for sure. Okay. So I already know when my major investments are up for renewal, and I'm already planning on, am I going to keep or replace? And I'm looking at the tech landscape to see what's best in class.
Very good.
So we're doing it more often now than ever because the pace of change is faster than ever.
And you think about how many of those, compared to when you and I first met to now, how many companies there are in that space, plus or minus, the number of go-to-market tech providers has doubled in the 5-ish, 6 years that you and I have known each other, because it is such an exciting space. There's a ton of venture money going into it, right? And a lot of people leaving, big brains that you and I both know, saying, I think I got a better idea of a specific job to be done that can be automated. Okay, so in this last little bit, Kim and I are going to talk about the ever-growing component of customer experience, and specifically, who owns it? So Kim, $3 billion, publicly traded, large enterprise company. When you think about CX, is that you? Is that your peer in sales? Is it the CEO? Who owns customer experience, and what does that look like at an organization like yours?
I think it's $1 million question. My answer is everybody owns customer experience, because our goal is to delight customers at every single touch point that they have with Akamai. And so, the hardest part of the journey is understanding all the different touch points in which they're engaging with us and making sure every single one is optimized throughout the journey. So I believe everybody owns the experience, and anything short of that would be a failure for the customer. And the secret sauce is, how do you connect those touch points end to end to make sure everyone has that 360-degree view of the customer, and the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. So,
without bragging and making you blush on camera, this would be Matt's paraphrasing. You have incredible purview and agility horizontally, which I think enables different people functionally at the vertical. What I mean by that. So if I'm an SDR working at Akamai, because you are thinking the way you think, I have what I need to do what I need to do, right, in my part of the commercial supply chain. If I am a new logo seller in the mid-market, hypothetically speaking, I'm armed because you're thinking end to end so that they can actually think about what's happening. And I bring this up, Kim, for our viewers and our listeners, because many people are struggling with, because things have changed, digital's come to the forefront, salespeople aren't face-to-face, like who owns the experience? How are we recreating the experience? But there still needs to be somebody who sits at the center that says, I, and in your case, this is you, have this almost fanatical obsession with where the customer is deriving value from end to end. And you mentioned it all through our conversation. You probably didn't even realize it. Tools, engagement, right? Propensity, like it's everywhere. So that would be my sort of paraphrase back to you.
Well, I think if we don't put customer in the front, then we fail as a company. And, we're never perfect, but I think just starting with that mindset is the most important first step for organizations, right? Because everyone has those blind spots when you're looking at a tool for a singular use case versus exploring, how that particular tool can enhance the customer journey end to end. So ask the question first. That's my advice.
I love it. Well, Kim, I could keep chatting, but I know you have to get on a call and continue to do what you're doing. It was wonderful to see you, and thank you for your generosity and just giving back to the SBI community with all your great insights.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. Great to catch up.
Yeah, you bet. All right, everybody. You just had a tutorial in marketing effectiveness and how to make sure that not only do you have the right data, you're listening for the right signals, you're executing properly, and you're thinking about the customer's end-to-end journey. But if there was one theme that stood out to me, it was Kim's use of data, fanatical use of data to really point you to where you need to go. So until next time, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center, our team, or to schedule a workshop, please visit salesbenchmarkindex.com.